4 years, FIFA presented the 2026 World Cup as the tournament that would unite football like never before. 48 teams. 3 host nations. 16 cities. More matches than any World Cup in history. On paper, it looked like football's biggest celebration. But something unusual has been happening in the build-up to this tournament. Not on the pitch. Not in the dressing rooms. Not even in FIFA headquarters. Among supporters. Among fan groups. Among travelers. Among people who normally spend years saving money just for the chance to attend a World Cup. Because instead of asking, "How do I get there?" a growing number of people have started asking a very different question. Should I go at all? And that question matters more than it might seem. Because World Cups are not built only on television audiences. They're built on atmosphere. They're built on traveling supporters. They're built on the idea that football can bring people together from every corner of the world. So when boycott campaigns, travel concerns, and fan protests begin appearing around the tournament, the issue isn't simply whether a few supporters stay home. The issue is whether the relationship between football's biggest event and football supporters is beginning to change. And if you enjoy football documentaries that go beyond the headlines, consider subscribing. Because this story isn't really about a boycott. It's about what happens when the world's biggest sporting event starts losing the trust of some of the people who made it special in the first place. And the first warning signs appeared long before a ball was kicked. When FIFA awarded the tournament to the United States, Canada, and Mexico, the logic seemed obvious. The infrastructure already existed. The stadiums were ready. The commercial potential was enormous. North America offered something previous hosts could only dream of. Scale. But scale can be both an advantage and a problem. Think about a supporter following their national team. In Germany 2006, many fans could travel between host cities in a matter of hours. In South Africa 2010, distances were larger, but the tournament remained within a single country. In Qatar 2022, fans could attend multiple matches in a single day. The 2026 World Cup is something entirely different. The tournament stretches across an entire continent. A supporter could theoretically travel from Vancouver to Miami, from Mexico City to Toronto, from Los Angeles to New York. Thousands of miles separate some host cities. And that creates a simple question. How accessible is this World Cup really? For wealthy supporters, the answer may be simple. For ordinary fans, it becomes much more complicated. Flights, hotels, internal travel, visa requirements, match tickets. Every layer adds cost. Every layer adds uncertainty. And that's where the first cracks began to appear. Because football supporters have increasingly started asking whether the tournament is being designed around fans or around growth. And that question only became louder when the competition expanded from 32 teams to 48. FIFA sees expansion as inclusion. More countries qualify. More fans become involved. More football nations experience the World Cup. That's the official argument. And it's a reasonable one. But critics see another side. More teams means more matches. More matches mean more travel. More travel means more expense. More expense means some supporters are left behind. And suddenly the debate is no longer about football. It's about who gets to experience football. But travel costs were only the beginning. Because another concern soon emerged. And this one touched the heart of what makes a World Cup different from every other tournament. Who can actually attend? One of FIFA's oldest ideas is that football belongs to everyone. It sounds simple, but it's incredibly important. The World Cup is one of the few events where supporters from dozens of countries share the same streets, trains, stadiums, and city centers. That's part of the magic. Yet in the lead-up to 2026, questions about visas, immigration policies, and border controls became increasingly difficult to ignore. Human rights organizations, football supporters, and policy analysts have all raised concerns that some fans may face significant barriers to attending matches, particularly in the United States. Then came incidents that intensified those concerns. Just before the tournament, Somali referee Omar Artan, selected by FIFA and set to become the first Somali referee at a men's World Cup, was denied entry into the United States despite holding a valid visa, according to FIFA and US authorities. Now, this wasn't a fan boycott story. It wasn't even a supporter issue directly. But symbolically, it mattered. Because it reinforced a question many people were already asking. If a FIFA-appointed World Cup official can encounter entry problems, what confidence do ordinary supporters have? Think about that for a moment. The concern isn't only who is denied. The concern is uncertainty. And uncertainty is often enough to discourage travel. Especially when international trips already cost thousands of dollars. Of course, organizers argue that the overwhelming majority of visitors will enter without issue. And historically, major tournaments often face similar concerns that never fully materialize. That is important context. Predictions are not reality. Concerns are not outcomes. But perceptions matter. And perception shapes behavior. Which brings us to the next layer of the story. Because some supporters aren't talking about boycotting because they're worried about entering the tournament. Some are questioning the tournament itself. One of the biggest ironies surrounding World Cup 2026 is that it may become the most connected tournament in history. And also one of the most fragmented. Football has always depended on shared experiences. Thousands of supporters arriving in one place. One city becoming the center of the football world. One nation hosting a global celebration. But this World Cup is spread across 3 countries and 16 cities. For FIFA, that creates opportunity. For some fans, it creates distance. The tournament risks feeling less like a shared gathering and more like dozens of separate events connected by television broadcasts. And supporters have noticed. Some fan groups have questioned whether football's most important competition is becoming increasingly commercialized. The debate became even louder when FIFA announced plans for a World Cup final halftime show modeled more closely on American sporting entertainment traditions. Critics argued it represented another step away from football culture and toward spectacle. Supporters of the move, meanwhile, argue it modernizes the tournament and helps reach new audiences. Neither side is entirely wrong. Football evolves. It always has. The Champions League evolved. The Premier League evolved. The World Cup itself evolved. But every change raises a deeper question. How much can football change before supporters feel disconnected from it? And that's where the boycott conversation becomes more complicated. Because many of the people discussing boycotts aren't rejecting football. They're defending what they believe football should be. And that distinction matters. If you're enjoying the documentary so far, leave a like. Because the next part may be the most important layer of all. Whenever people talk about World Cup boycotts, they often focus on politics. But football history tells us something interesting. Most successful fan movements are rarely about a single issue. They're usually about accumulation. One concern becomes 2. 2 become 5. 5 become 10. Eventually, people stop talking about individual problems. They start talking about trust. And that's what appears to be happening around parts of the World Cup conversation. Some supporters are concerned about travel. Others about costs. Others about immigration issues. Others about commercialization. Others about human rights questions. Others about environmental impact. Individually, each issue affects different groups. Collectively, they create a broader feeling. And feelings can be powerful. Especially in football. Recent environmental studies estimate the expanded tournament could generate dramatically higher emissions than previous World Cups, largely because of the enormous travel distances between host cities. Some estimates place total emissions at more than double those associated with Qatar 2022. Again, FIFA has a counterargument. The organization points out that existing stadiums are being used rather than constructing many new venues. FIFA also highlights sustainability initiatives and transport planning. But critics respond that the fundamental scale of the tournament creates environmental costs that are difficult to avoid. And once again, we arrive at the same question. What is the modern World Cup actually trying to be? Bigger, more profitable, more global, more inclusive. Can it be all 4 simultaneously? Or do trade-offs eventually become unavoidable? The answer to that question may shape football's future far beyond 2026. But there is one final layer that makes this story particularly significant. Because this isn't the first time football supporters have pushed back. For decades, football has experienced a quiet struggle. Not between clubs. Not between players. Between growth and identity. Ticket prices. Kickoff times. Broadcast deals. Tournament expansions. Super League proposals. Every era produces its own version of the same debate. Who is football for? The institutions often argue growth benefits everyone. And sometimes they're right. Modern football reaches billions of people. Investment has transformed facilities, broadcasting, and player development. But supporters often worry about something less measurable. Belonging. The feeling that football still belongs to the people who fill stadiums. The people who travel thousands of miles. The people who pass traditions from one generation to the next. And that's why the growing boycott conversation matters. Not because millions of fans will suddenly refuse to watch the World Cup. Most won't. The tournament will still attract huge audiences. The stadiums will still be packed. The football will still matter. But beneath those realities lies a deeper signal. Some supporters increasingly feel disconnected from decisions being made above them. And when enough supporters feel that way, football institutions eventually have to listen. Because football's greatest asset has never been television contracts, or sponsorship agreements, or host city deals. It's emotional investment. Once that weakens, everything else becomes more fragile. So is World Cup 2026 really in crisis? Probably not in the way headlines suggest. The tournament will still be enormous. It will still dominate global sport. It will still produce unforgettable moments. But dismissing the growing boycott movement entirely would also be a mistake. Because the real story isn't whether a boycott succeeds. The real story is why the conversation exists at all. Why are some supporters questioning attendance? Why are fan organizations raising concerns? Why are debates around access, costs, culture, and identity becoming more common? Those questions point toward something bigger than a single tournament. They point toward football's future. A future where the sport continues to grow globally, but also risks drifting away from the people who gave it meaning in the first place. And that's the paradox of World Cup 2026. It may become the biggest World Cup ever staged. Yet the debate surrounding it is forcing football to confront a surprisingly simple question. Can football become bigger without becoming more distant? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think concerns surrounding the 2026 World Cup are being exaggerated? Or do they reveal a deeper problem developing inside the modern game? Because long after the final whistle blows, that question will remain. Football has always found a way to unite the world. The question is whether the people running it still understand what brings the world together.